I'm very glad to be here in Ottawa. I recognize it. I'm going to introduce the worst presentation. I mean, this is a lot of text, but I had a very long journey yesterday, more or less 26 hours. So I prefer to write a lot of things just in order to make sure that if my presentation is terrible, you will have information. Okay? But please don't read. You know, I tend to say that I tend to think that everyone knows a lot about the United Nations Agenda 2030. Is it true? Yes, more or less. I mean, I live in this Agenda 2030 bubble. People that always, I think we dream in the 2030 agenda, but then you realize that you need to localize the 2030 agenda into reality, in concrete goals and concrete actions. And this is one of our main challenges now, how to introduce this new agenda, this new global agenda, how to link it with the previous existing ones. I mean, the climate change agenda, I mean, the Paris Agreement, also with the new urban agenda that was approved in Ecuador and in Quito in 2016. How do we link all this new agenda with a concrete thing? I mean, in our case, the European climate policy framework. So I can promise you that in Europe we are just, I think we are going to be crazy, yes, in order, because we try to match all these agendas and we try to localize the 2030 agenda and how to link it into reality. And the European Commission has recently created a multi-stakeholder platform on how to, that advises the European Commission on how to implement the 2030 agenda, the European policies and budget. So it's not so easy, but we are there. So I think that we took the lead. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this. I tend to speak very fast. English is not my mother tongue, so if you don't understand me, please feel free to say, Arnau, come on, be calm, because if not, at the end of I think that the presentation is fantastic because everyone says, but at the end, no one has understood anything. So let's avoid this point, okay? Okay. So, only a brief explanation about the EEAC network, because I am here representing this fantastic network created in 1993 in Europe. It gathers the 14 advisory bodies from 11 countries, and I mean the national and international level in Europe. We are not, I'm not an academic. I don't come from academia. I'm not a professor, but I'm not a politician. I'm an advisor. I have this privileged observer position, which sometimes is causes you some kind of frustration when you see that science and experts say something and politicians decide the contrary. So these councils try to match this, to bridge the gap between science and policy making. So we have councils from Belgium, from Catalonia, from Flanders, France, Germany. We have 3 German councils, 2 councils from Hungary, Ireland, Luxembourg, Montenegro, the Netherlands, and Portugal. And we are also in a very close contact with the new Finnish and Swedish councils on sustainable development. It's a very interesting experience. I mean, this having these councils in place means that these countries have a really solid, I mean, in terms of sustainable, I mean, in terms of the that they have a deep political culture. I mean, they try to ask for advisory positions to both experts and civil society, and they are willing to listen from their experience. And I think it's a good example that other governments and parliaments should adapt. Let's start with the Paris Agreement. You know that I'm aware that you know more than me everything about the Paris Agreement that aims to hold global average temperature increase to well below 2 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. A lot has been said about the Paris Agreement, but the most important thing is that it brings together all the international community. All nations are invited, are committed in principle, in the paper, to fight against climate change, to boost mitigation policies. So, and they are under this agreement. They are due to undertake and communicate their intentions and their efforts. As I told before, we have also this. The Paris Agreement was approved in December 2015. The Agenda 2030 or 2030 Agenda was approved just 2 months before, in September 2015, and it entered into force just in the 1st of July 2016. And I'm sure you know that it has 17 global SDGs with 169 targets, focusing. They touch on poverty, on zero hunger, welfare, education, health, education, gender equality, water, energy. Everything is there. And the 2030 Agenda has been. It is the result of a very long and very diplomatic negotiation in the process. So the final result is a very wide agenda with very wide or very unconcrete goals, and with and then they need to be really concretized and localized everywhere. These goals are universal, they are indivisible, and although they are not binding for government, they invited government, national governments, but also some national and local. They're invited to come with concrete plans, with concrete strategies to really implement these SDGs at home, taking into account their national or international and local conditions. And the question is, how do we link these two agendas? There is no explicit, the SDGs are not mentioned in the Paris Agreement, but the resolution, the United Nations resolution transforming our world, recognizes that climate change is one of the major challenges we face just now, and it's not new to you. But the 2030 Agenda contains a specific target, a specific goal, SDG 13, on climate action. And it aims to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. So it's a clear link. It talks about, if you go to the targets, there are 3 specific targets. This SDG 3 that asks us for a stronger action on climate change, both in terms of resilience and adaptive capacity, both in terms of mitigation and education and people engagement. What I see is that you are looking at to the screen, so I will try to do something different to have your attention. It's a joke, but the problem when you have too much text is that everyone looks at the screen, not at the speaker. So it doesn't matter. I am aware of this, and I can survive with this. But it's true that the SDG 13 is not, although it is the main goal focus on climate change in the 2030 Agenda. There are many other targets, many other goals and targets that are towards a new transition in terms of climate change and energy. And the most important thing is that this agenda with these different goals and targets focusing on climate change, they clearly invite us to break silos and to look at the reality with a totally different perspective. And that's good. This agenda links climate change with poverty, climate change with education, health, economic growth. So, for the first time from our experience as councils, this agenda invites the governments to make a very, it should be a normal situation, but I can assure you that it's not the case. But the agenda invites to make a transversal analysis of all policies. I mean, we are very used to work in silos. This is a reality both at national, subnational, and local levels. So it's very difficult to focus, to reach concrete goals and to transform reality if we continue working like this. And this implies to make a complete new, to make a completely new analysis of how the different factors are interlinked to climate change. For instance, I just mentioned it to complete SDG 2 and SDG 7, how they are related to climate change. But now, because I think that I have to continue out of time, now I am going to make the link with the EU climate policy and the 2030 agenda. As Miranda has already mentioned it, in October 2014, the EU leaders approved this the EU 2030 climate and energy framework, which sets 3 key targets by the near future, by 2030, which is just tomorrow. And the idea is, okay, we are going to reduce to cut the 40% of our emissions from the 1990 levels. We are going to have to achieve this 27% share of renewable energy and at least this 27% improvement in energy efficiency. And these three targets are linked and in line with different roadmaps that have been approved by the European Commission in recent years, mainly focused on 2015. Okay, and it's important to say that they are linked to 2015, where the European Commission agreed to reduce to cut their emissions to between the 80 and 95% by 2030. This is a completely new situation. I mean, if we can reduce the transition towards these goals will be enormous and very difficult, as Miranda also mentioned it when analyzing the situation in Europe. But coming back to the relation between that framework, I mean that these 3 goals are established in the European Energy Climate Framework with the 2030 agenda. What we see is that there are many goals behind this climate policy, the European climate policy. There are many goals that are directly linked to the SDGs. For instance, the EU climate policy aims to ensure affordable energy for all consumers, and this means to take a look to energy from the perspective of SDG 1, MD40, and SDG 7, which is how to ensure that everyone has affordable energy. Another, as Miranda already mentioned it, this framework tries to increase the security of the EU energy supplies, and it links directly to SDG 7 and SDG 8. I mean, SDG 7 energy, SDG 8 growth, economic growth. The EU climate policy also wants to reduce the EU dependency on energy import, and it's again SDG 7 and SDG 8. I mean, economic growth. So it's important to make sure that economic growth is there. But this EU climate policy, it talks about also how to create new opportunities for growth and jobs. And this is SDG 8, which is economic growth, SDG 9, which is enterprises and business, but it's also SDG 4. How do we produce, how do we have new professionals able to be to work in this transition towards a new climate and energy scenario. But it brings also, the EU climate policy also wants to bring health benefits through reduction air pollution, and it means to link with SDG 3, health, SDG 4, education, because we have reports that link directly, establish the link between air pollution and learning, how young people is able to study and to learn, but it is also related with SDG 11, which is cities. So, what I want to say is that EU climate policy is not a matter only of climate, but is linked to all SDGs, linked with sectorial and economic and social dimension. Okay. But now, the main point, and I think that perhaps this explanation, this presentation is not so concrete. I mean, we are talking about these SDGs, and I also talk about the SDG bubble, because we are trying to make this new agenda a reality and make something concrete. It is not easy, as already mentioned, a new multi-stakeholder platform has been created by the European Commission just in order to make a reflection paper on how to localize SDGs in Europe. Obviously, linking with EU climate policy. A more practical step is how the European Commission, the European Union, integrates the SDGs into the multi-annual financial framework. How the multi-annual financial framework, which is the one that establishes the maximum, the budget of the European Union for a 5-7 years period, how this multi-annual financial framework is able to integrate the SDGs and then influence and make this the transformation that is behind the 2030 agenda, and make this transformation power potential reality. I must assure you that it's not easy. I mean, because we are discussing it, and the European Commission with Vice President Timmermans is dealing with this, because the European Union adopted the 2030 agenda as a core issue, so in a very short time, as the majority of states in the world did. But now it's time to try to find something concrete and try to make something tangible about the agenda. This is why I use many times this bubble concept. How do we make something interesting? And in this case, how do we use the SDGs for transforming the energy policy? How do we link? I think it's more a question than an answer, what I'm going to say now. But it's not, because there is a challenge we have now on the table. We are working hard on this. All countries that decided to adopt the 2030 agenda are in the same situation. How to make something concrete, and how to integrate this very wide perspective of the 2030 agenda into concrete, how to transform this very wide concept of this very wide agenda into concrete goals that will transform, in this case, the European climate policy. I think that one of the most important things is that a lot of, not only governments and parliaments, but also stakeholders, stakeholders and companies have adopted SDGs as a core issue, at least in Europe, at least in the paper. So once they have adopted this 2030 agenda, now things are changing. New dialogues come, that's what they have. Yeah. the point is, the 2030 agenda opens the floor for a serious debate on future, linking the different dimensions of sustainable development. In this case, linking the different SDGs and the different elements that have an influence to climate change. And through this individual, companies, stakeholders, individuals, the business community, stakeholders, but governments, some new coalitions appear, and these new coalitions appear. These new coalitions that have appeared in recent months, and hopefully they will, the ones that will come, they will speed up some of the, at least according to our vision, they will speed up the transformation towards more sustainable scenario, and in this case, they will speed up, or they should speed up some of the main elements and main activities that are needed, the main actions that are needed to go to these European goals. Well, welcome to the SDG bubble. Welcome to the difficult task of making something concrete with this agenda. Welcome to the challenge of making energy transition and policy transition reality. And let's make this transition possible thanks to the new coalitions that will appear thanks to the new agenda. It will be, 2030 is just in the corner, while these transitions, both in climate and energy, are really urgent issues. So let's also try to do our best to speed up in these transformations. And I think, as I said before, that this complex 2030 agenda, if we manage it very well, will help us to make the transition. Thank you very much.